This yogurt tastes kind of like sour milk, but they say it's good for us, so I guess we keep on eating it. But is it really good for us? Today's guest, Dr. William Davis, calls store-bought yogurt garbage, and that we're best off making our own with probiotics that pack a punch. A renowned cardiologist, Dr. Davis shifted focus to gut health after seeing major improvements in heart patients following simple diet changes. This prompted his writing #1 bestseller, Wheat Belly, followed by Super Gut. Today, he'll talk about what the good bacteria can do for you across the phases of menopause. One such microbe works as a natural antibiotic that you can source for $2 and start growing in about 5 minutes. We'll reveal how. Which microbes counter endotoxicity to lower cancer risk, obesity, and premature aging? Which microbe can counter the UTIs and urge incontinence symptoms of menopause? And which one helps curb the hot flashes and/or chills that so many ladies experience? This and more today on Vital Signs, where we learn how to get healthier from all angles, from the biochemical and nutritional to the things we do that nourish our minds and our souls. I'm Brendon Fallon. Dr. Davis, great to have you back on Vital Signs again.
Thanks, Brendon. Thanks for the invitation.
And excited to have you back to continue our look at microbiome health for women in their menopausal years. Last time you introduced some powerful microbes for boosting health. Today we're going to look at how we get those into our bodies. But first, why is the collective microbiome in such a terrible state?
We live in a world now, our world, where we've disrupted the gastrointestinal microbiome dramatically by the reliance on processed, ultra-processed foods and all the silly, awful, destructive advice coming from official sources to cut your saturated fat, eat more healthy whole grains, everything in moderation. That is lethal advice. That is advice that causes obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, dementia, etc. In other words, this mess we find ourselves in, Brendon, where these diseases are now becoming the rule rather than the exception, it is the fault of dietary guidelines, unclear thinking in diet, and the food industry. Unfortunately, the American diet has gravitated towards heavily weighed in favor of processed and ultra-processed foods. These are frozen dinners. These are cookies, chips, soft drinks, and kids have diets almost exclusively with those kinds of things. Mac and cheese, cheeseburgers, French fries. And a lot of those foods have unhealthy ingredients like emulsifying agents like polysorbate 80 or carboxymethylcellulose, which change the microbial composition of your gastrointestinal tract. Or they have preservatives, BHT, BHA, potassium sorbate, sodium benzoate. Those are antimicrobial. They keep, for instance, mold from growing in your food, but they also have antimicrobial effects in your gastrointestinal tract. And then there's pharmaceuticals that impact the microbiome. So the mouth is filled with microbes, good and bad. And when you lose stomach acid from taking a stomach acid blocking drug, oral microbes are able to descend via swallowing, colonize the stomach, and then colonize the small bowel.
Sorry, the mouth is supposed to be fairly acidic.
It's supposed to be minimally acidic because it's acid that erodes teeth and causes cavities. And that's why grains like wheat, corn, rye, barley are extravagant causes of tooth decay. So we know this with confidence because we know that prior to the consumption of wheat and grains 10,000 years ago, that tooth decay, incredibly, Brendon, tooth decay was uncommon. So think about that. So tooth decay was uncommon. 1% to 3% of all teeth showed decay, cavities, abscess formation, misalignment, or loss. And this was a time there was no fluoridated toothpaste. There was no fluoridated water. There was no dental floss. There was no dentists. And yet there was almost no tooth decay, which makes sense. If you're living a life of hunting and gathering plants and roots and berries and a lot of your meats, you can't, if you lose your teeth, you can't eat, you're going to die. So it makes sense that people would live their lives with full mouths of teeth. When they incorporated wheat and grains, as they first did in the Fertile Crescent, in what is now Israel and Syria, they gathered wild einkorn wheat. And when they did that, there was an explosion in tooth decay. 16 to 49% of all teeth recovered showed decay, abscess, tooth loss, and misalignment. This was true in every locale where seeds of grasses, that's what grains are, were incorporated, like maize and teosinte in the Central America, millet in sub-Saharan Africa. So over and over again, the anthropological studies have told us when humans consume grains, there's an explosion in tooth decay. So, but anyway.
So on top of all these negative influences on the health of the microbiome that are kind of adding up throughout the lifespan, then a woman hits menopause. Are there specific things that happen that would influence the microbiome at that point?
Many things. Taking a battering from all these influences, and there's more. That's a partial list we just talked about. Grain consumption, glyphosate, preservatives, emulsifying agents, stomach acid blocking drugs. There's more. So for anybody, woman or man, to want to start cleaning up their microbiome, you start by cleaning up your life. You filter your drinking water. You buy organic food whenever available, whenever your budget permits. You get off pharmaceuticals like stomach acid blocking drugs. So we clean up our lives first. One of the things that is a common thread in aging, men and women, but especially impactful for ladies, is the proliferation of a class of microbes called proteobacteria. These are fecal microbes that many of your listeners may recognize. These are species like E. coli, and Campylobacter and Salmonella, because these are also the species of food poisoning.
In Menopause and the Microbiome Part 1, we learned about this phenomenon of SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, whereby fecal microbes that belong solely in the colon ascend to the small intestine and wreak havoc on the gastrointestinal system, leading to a spread of disease so diverse as to include depression, irritable bowel syndrome, and skin rashes. Fortunately, there are good bacteria like Lactobacillus reuteri and gasseri that can counter this infestation.
Lactobacillus reuteri and Lactobacillus gasseri are very unique in that they take up residence in the small intestine. Most microbes don't do that. They just colonize the colon. But those two species colonize the 24 feet of small intestine, where they take up residence and then produce what are called bacteriocins, natural antibiotics effective against fecal microbes.
Find the link to Part 1 at the top of the comments and in the description below. Now, let's hear about the yogurt solution to SIBO.
Even though it sounds like a little yogurt, what you're achieving is a massive return of health, whether it's reduction in potential for cancer, reduction in abdominal fat that's inflammatory, reduction in blood sugar, reduction in potential for dementia, reduction in health conditions like fibromyalgia and rosacea and psoriasis and restless leg syndrome. You obtain a huge long list of beneficial effects. Now think about this, Brendon. So we're talking about restoring microbes that reduce your wrinkles, restore youthful muscle, increase libido, restores vaginal moisture, amplifies your immune response. We're turning the clock back 10 or 20 years. You do these things, a few months pass, you look in the mirror and say, whoa, I don't have crow's feet anymore. I don't have those smile lines. The depth of my nasolabial fold and forehead is reduced. My shoulders are firmer. My neck is firmer. So we're turning the clock back in ways that you can experience and see in the mirror now, not in the hopes of 30 years from now. In other words, there's huge transformation in health. They lose weight. They lose abdominal fat. So doing these things, it's not uncommon to lose several inches off your waist, even with no change in diet. Because what we're doing is getting rid of fecal microbes that were causing release of toxins into your bloodstream that were inflammatory and driving the process of insulin resistance. We reverse that. Now, we do this by generating very high counts of microbes. One of the problems with commercial probiotics is they sell these things to you in very low numbers of microbes because it's very expensive to manufacture probiotics. So they'll put 1 billion or 2 billion or 10 billion, which sounds like a lot, but in microbes, it's not. You really want more towards tens of billions to hundreds of billions. Well, how can a woman, let's say, get reuteri or gasseri, and she bought it, maybe only has 5 billion, but you want more like 50 billion? Well, how do you do that? Well, one option for someone is to make it as we call it yogurt, Brendon, but it's not yogurt. It's not the stuff in the store. Stuff in the store is garbage. we're going to ferment it. We're going to do some unusual things. We're going to ferment it for a prolonged period. So reuteri, for instance, microbes don't have sex, right? They just double themselves, asexual reproduction. So reuteri doubles every 3 hours or so at human body temperature. So we're going to ferment it in something that looks and smells like yogurt for 36 hours. That allows it to double 12 times. We perform flow cytometry to count the microbes. We get 300 billion per half cup serving. And so far, of about 50 people who've done this, 90% test negative for hydrogen gas after being positive, test negative after 4 weeks. Some people have SIBO so bad they have to do this for a long time. But I've been encouraging people to do this. Make that yogurt, reuteri gaceri yogurt. I call it SIBO yogurt. And do it for the rest of your life. 4 weeks every day. And then if you normalize your H2 gas or you have some other evidence that you're normalizing your SIBO, then maybe do it 3 times a week or so, because it seems to also prevent recurrence. And because those species, but especially reuteri, has youth-preserving, age-reversing effects. Loss of wrinkles, restoration, youthful muscle, increased libido.
Afterward, check the description below for a link that you can click to leave your email address and to get access to an owl reuteri yogurt recipe from Dr. Davis. In a moment, we'll learn which microbe helps fend off urinary tract infections and other genitourinary issues of menopause. But first, here's a quick look at menopause and the microbiome, part 1.
As a woman ages, skin aging, dryness, thinning of the dermal layer of skin, wrinkles. If your wife said, "Hey, doc, I think I have SIBO," what do you think then? Well, I've got bloating and diarrhea. I have numerous food intolerances. I can't lose weight, all kinds of things.
What can be done? Why is it important? Find the link to that video in this video's description below. And to get notice of new Vital Signs videos, follow me at Vital Signs Brendon on Instagram and Facebook, and at See Vital Signs on X.
Now, there's another really important aspect to talk about in female health. That is, for years, the phenomena of menopause were very confusing because the gynecologists didn't have good labels for the conditions that women experience. They had all kinds of crazy names. But they recently, about 2015, said, all right, let's get together and make sense out of this. They came out of that process and said, okay, we're going to call all the phenomena of menopause the genitourinary syndrome of menopause. We say GSM, genitourinary syndrome of menopause. That includes loss of libido, vaginal atrophy, that is loss of the moisture and the lining of the vagina, which is very common as a woman ages, and repeated urinary tract infections and urge incontinence. The conventional medical solutions for this process are awful. So if a woman loses libido, some ladies don't want it back, but some do. There's 2 drugs, and they both suck. They're terrible. So bad that the FDA is contemplating retracting their approval. Like flibanserin. A woman has to anticipate sex 40 minutes ahead of time. Who does that? And then it increases libido a little bit, maybe. So a woman has lousy choices for libido. How about vaginal atrophy? Well, the only thing a woman has, so pain, dryness, discharge, odors, it's a bad problem for many ladies, and it becomes universal after about age 65 and into your later years. So the only solution is estrogens. Well, estrogens at that age group, let's say a woman who's 70, increases risk for endometrial cancer, breast cancer, cardiovascular death, and dementia. So a woman's given a horrible choice. In order to regain vaginal moisture in the line, she has to expose herself, and thromboembolic disease, blood clots. She has to expose herself to life-threatening side effects. So lousy. How about repeated urinary tract infections? Well, repeated antibiotics. And with each round of antibiotic, a woman's health deteriorates further. How about urge incontinence? A woman laughs, coughs, or sneezes, and pees, wets herself. Very embarrassing. You're at a gathering, and you cough, and you wet yourself. So women have to wear diapers, or they have surgical solutions, which are horrible. And so the whole world of this genitourinary syndrome of menopause has lousy conventional solutions where a woman has to make very difficult decisions to manage it. Well, guess what? The microbiome has spectacular solutions. How about libido? Well, Restoration of reuteri, lost by nearly everybody, boosts oxytocin, which is a major driver of libido. So libido comes back. In fact, in my audience, I asked one time, we were talking about this, and I said, those of about 90 people, I said, those of you who had an increase in libido, raise your hand. All the hands go up. A lot of hands go, right?
Roughly what was the age of the ladies in that crowd of 90, Dr. Davis?
55 and above.
Right.
Now, how about vaginal atrophy? Terrible problem for ladies. Well, we know that oxytocin restores vaginal moisture as well as estrogen, but with none of the risks. No thromboembolic disease, no endometrial cancer, no breast cancer risk. So once again, reuteri and oxytocin. How about crispatus, Lactobacillus crispatus, the dominant microbe that's all women are supposed to have? You restore that, and it adds to restoring vaginal moisture and sensation. How about repeated urinary tract infections and urge incontinence? Lactobacillus crispatus, dramatic reduction in urinary tract infections and urge incontinence. It may not eradicate entirely, but dramatically reduces it. So we restore those two microbes, reuteri, and by the way, crispatus makes a delicious yogurt. Best tasting yogurt you ever had. Tastes like cream cheese. So, but the reason for making it as a yogurt or other fermented foods is to increase the counts of microbes. So if you have an army going to battle against 10,000 enemies and you show up in the army of 1,000, well, good luck, right? What if you show up in the army of 100,000? You're more likely to win the battle. Same thing here. The numbers really do matter. But when you purchase it as a probiotic, because of costs and because of constraints of the size of a capsule, you get low numbers. So we're going to ferment it, usually as yogurt, and increase microbial count 100 to 1,000 fold. And you're much more likely to have meaningful biological effects. And I'm seeing this in ladies who say, I do this. I make my reuteri yogurt. I make my crispatus yogurt. They're delicious. And I have it with some blueberries and chia seeds or whatever. And my libido is back. My vaginal moisture is back. I don't have urinary tract infections, and I can cough and sneeze all I want and not wet myself. So we've stumbled onto a solution that's very benign. Now, are there side effects? No. There are side benefits: smoother skin, youthful musculature, loss of abdominal fat, better mood, better well-being, increased intensity of love and affection. I mean, so all we're doing, Brendon, all we're doing is restoring things that we all should have had, including postmenopausal ladies, should have had all along. But all those things we talked about, antibiotics, preservatives, stomach acid block, all that stuff disrupted those microbes. So all we're doing is restoring microbes you should have had all along.
In a moment, we'll hear how you can test for fecal microbes in the small intestine to determine if you have SIBO, and likewise, how to test how effective you've been at wiping SIBO out. First, though, here's a snapshot from Menopause and the Microbiome, Part 1, on lowering breast cancer risk.
Well, where in this equation have they addressed the disrupted gastrointestinal microbiome so that you can stop SIBO and endotoxemia and its contribution to cancer, and you can stop the abnormal processing of estrogens? That requires efforts specifically targeted on the gastrointestinal microbiome. But if you talk to any oncologist and say, what role is the gastrointestinal microbiome in this? They'll say, oh, none.
The link to that video is at the top of the comment and in the description below.
How can the world's worst epidemic of a disease become almost unrecognized by conventional healthcare people in conventional healthcare until we have a consumer device for self-testing for this condition? It's called the AIR device. I don't know if I've mentioned that before. Here's the original AIR device.
This is testing the hydrogen in the breath? This tests okay.
Here's the more recent one. Tests hydrogen gas and methane. You blow into it, talks to your smartphone via Bluetooth, and it registers 0 to 10, for instance, for hydrogen gas. So some microbes produce hydrogen gas, but we cannot produce hydrogen gas. So you can use these devices. It's AIRE, A-I-R-E. I have no relationship with the company. The company's called Food Marble. And on a 0 to 10 scale, if you have a rise of 4 after ingesting fiber consumed by microbes, it's positive for SIBO. Well, I talked about this thing. I had many conversations with the PhD engineer inventor in Dublin, Ireland, Dr. Angus Short. And what this thing does is it maps for you where microbes are living. So if you find that microbes are living in the colon, that's normal. That's okay. We don't want microbes living in the upper GI tract, the esophagus, stomach, duodenum, jejunum. So we consume something that microbes can process to produce hydrogen gas, and we time it. How fast do you produce a big uptick in hydrogen gas? And if you do so within the first 90 minutes after doing that, you have microbes living in. And what surprised me, Brendon, I expected this to be a rare thing. No, it's everywhere. It was an unusual person who tested negative. Now, you might say, well, maybe the concept is flawed. Maybe the device is flawed. Well, but I saw this happen also. Someone would test positive, they would address it and eradicate this issue, the SIBO, and I would see normalization of the hydrogen gas measurement and some residual health problem go away. So, common situation. Somebody says, I did your basic program where we eliminate wheat, grains, and sugars. We don't limit fat, never limit calories. We just eat whole, real foods. We address common nutrient deficiencies that impact insulin resistance. And we take basic efforts in the microbiome. The person says, I did that. I was a type 2 diabetic. My hemoglobin A1C, long-term measure of blood glucose, blood sugar, dropped from 11.7%, which is a level that gives you blindness, heart disease, dementia, and kidney failure. And I got it down now to 6.1. Better, much better, but not perfect. Perfect is 5.0% or less. Most of us have hemoglobin A1Cs in the 4 range.
You said fiber that microorganisms eat. Specifically, what should people eat to test?
In testing labs, they usually use glucose or lactulose. We use inulin because we want a fiber or sugar, but we want something that most undesirable fecal species can metabolize. So in most labs, they use glucose, which is dumb because humans process glucose often before microbes can get their hands on it. Lactulose, a little better. Inulin, better. And I think what's going to happen over time is testing labs will go towards inulin like we do. So we take a couple teaspoons of inulin in your coffee or in your food, whatever. So you test baseline before eating, then you test with consumption of inulin, and you test every 15 to 30 minutes or so for about up to 90 minutes. So let's say I start at 1.2, very low, 0 to 10. And I drink my coffee with 2 teaspoons of inulin, and then at 30 minutes, it's 9.8. Big uptake. I've got microbes living up high. Now, what if I test positive 120 minutes, 2 hours? Well, that's probably in the colon where it's supposed to happen, right? So the longer it takes, the less we're able to say, is this the colon or is this the ileum? We can't say. So it's the early rises in the H2 measurement that tell us you have SIBO. Now, you don't have to test. So it's a great device. It's very helpful. It's especially helpful for identifying recurrence.
And we'll put the link in the description below so viewers can access that, can find the Air device, look it up online. And also there we have the link to your book, SuperGuard, as well, Dr. Davis, where people can get more information about how to use this device and also look up further recipes like the reuteri yogurt one. I'd like to take it back just a little bit. Before we were talking about urge incontinence and UTIs, how certain bacteria can help with this. It's very wondrous. I mean, because I would think that certain, muscles in the bladder are involved in this, like a deterioration of certain muscles that would lead to these kinds of problems like urge incontinence. How is it that the microbiome is able to help with this kind of problem?
A lot to unpack there. So one way is, so think about this. Think how remarkable this is. A woman can take a capsule containing Lactobacillus crispatus orally, and then it will colonize the vagina. So does crispatus translocate from the gastrointestinal tract to the vagina through the bloodstream? Nobody knows. No one knows. But somehow it gets to the vagina. Then even more remarkably, crispatus in the vagina colonizes the bladder. Now ask any practicing physician, should urine be sterile? They'll say yes. The bladder should not have a microbiome. It does have a microbiome. More modern techniques to identify microbes has revealed that the bladder has a microbiome. It's supposed to have microbes. And if you don't have those beneficial microbes, fecal microbes like E. coli can colonize and cause urinary tract infections. So restoring crispatus orally colonizes the vagina, colonizes the bladder, and that's how it reduces, by competition suppression, urinary tract infections. It's not quite clear why it reduces urge incontinence. That's a wacky one, but it does. Don't know why. So this, you and I and your listeners are on the edge of what is known. So while we know a lot, there's a lot we don't know. So just what? But that research, by the way, on crispatus came out of Loyola, where I am in Chicago. They've done very elegant work, eye-opening work that has posed all kinds of new findings, including that crispatus is necessary for all ladies to have, and many ladies have lost it. And this has relevance also, by the way, Brendon, in the reproductive years. If a woman lacks crispatus, she's more prone to miscarriage, premature labor. And so all ladies should have crispatus. All ladies should have reuteri. So a pregnant woman has better control over uterine contractions. She has more control over breastfeeding. A lot of modern ladies can't breastfeed. They don't have enough milk and can't express it. Well, reuteri via oxytocin regulates the expression of breast milk. And reuteri via oxytocin makes that mother-infant bond. And ladies who don't have it are more likely to have postpartum depression, which is a very dangerous condition for a child, when a mother can't bond with the child.
We've talked about some of the more severe end symptoms that can be helped through improving the microbiome today. What you might say are more surface level symptoms, like the hot flashes that a woman going through menopause experiences, or the chills, or these kinds of things. How can improving the microbiome help with those?
It's not quite clear how or why, but Lactobacillus gasseri is a champion in reducing those so-called vasomotor postmenopausal symptoms. So it might not eradicate it, but it dramatically reduces it. So gasseri is, once again, worth cultivating as a yogurt or other fermented foods. By the way, it doesn't have to be dairy. Could be coconut milk. I have on my kitchen counter right now salsa, vegetables like eggplant, onions, tomatoes. I have several juices that I'm fermenting. So I encourage everybody to make a habit of getting fermented foods. Easy way to look at fermented foods. Two general groups of microbes. Microbes that ferment at room temperature, like sauerkraut and kimchi, and microbes that ferment at human body temperature, like reuteri and gasseri. So the human body temperature microbes, we have to ferment in a device that keeps them warm, like about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, more or less. But there are microbes that ferment at room temperature. My favorite is Bacillus subtilis. Actually, about 90 degrees for Bacillus subtilis. That germinates in the small intestine, produces bacteriocins, very, very broad spectrum bacteriocins, by the way. Or Saccharomyces boulardii. That's a great room temperature fermenting microbe. One of the things we do is we take either Bacillus subtilis or Saccharomyces boulardii. We get it as a probiotic, or in the case of Bacillus subtilis, go to Aldi's or Costco, buy their kombucha that's made with that microbe. So at Aldi, it's $2.19. Take a quarter cup of that, pour it into a juice. Just make sure the juice has no preservatives in it, no potassium sorbate, no sodium benzoate. Cap it. In the case of Bacillus subtilis, keep it at 90 degrees in your device. In the case of Saccharomyces boulardii, kitchen counter temperature. And after about 60 hours, keep it capped very lightly, because you're going to see it bubbling. It's producing so much carbon dioxide. And if you cap it too tightly, it will explode and make a mess in your kitchen. So keep it lightly, or vent it every so often. Do that for about 60 hours. Taste it. If it's sweet, let it go another 8 to 12 hours. You don't want sugar. We want little to no sugar in these juices. But once it's done, after 60 or so hours, drink a quarter, a half cup, a couple times a day. Huge benefits, because these things kind of bring back order to your gastrointestinal microbiome. And it tastes like, so I have mango passion fruit juice and cranberry plum. It tastes like soda. So it's wonderful. You're going to have to restrain yourself from drinking a ton, but we don't, because it tastes a little bit of sugar. But you're going to find yourself looking forward to having these juices because they're so delicious.
Dr. Davis, thank you so much for coming on again and continuing our look at how the microbiome can be improved to enhance women's health across the lifespan. Look forward to speaking to you again sometime in the future.
Thanks, Brendon. Let's do it.
So, fermenting good bacteria like reuteri longer result in much higher counts of microbes than store-bought yogurt, and can fend off SIBO, UTIs, and other infections with much more vigor. Up next, Why is the mucus lining of the gut so crucial? And how could common foods like ice cream and even water that we drink affect it?
Because when you let that ice cream thaw and then you refreeze it, it separates. And you have a glob of ice and solids, and it's really not edible anymore. So they add all these mixing or emulsifying agents. Well, guess what? When you eat that ice cream...
The link to Menopause and the Microbiome Part 1, with its special focus on breast cancer prevention, is at the top of the comments and in the description below. Also, there is my interview with Dr. Dan Monti on key foods and nutrients to curb anxiety.
We know that inflammation is a component of mood disorders, and so we want to mitigate inflammation. And one of the ways we do that is with diet and making sure that we have enough of those anti-inflammatory foods. We want to make sure that there's lots of healthy fat because those fats are anti-inflammatory.
And omega-3 seems to be a really critical component of a good diet for countering inflammation and potentially reducing anxiety. But how should people be getting this? What is the optimized way to get the omega-3 that you need? You can subscribe to access these and other news and health insights by clicking the big red button below. It's been great to be with you. I'm Brendon Fallon, and this is Vital Signs.